In 1645, a 60-year-old man climbed alone into a cave in the mountains of Kyushu, Japan. He had never lost a duel, not once in 61 fights spanning 4 decades. He had defeated the greatest swordsman of his era, sometimes with a wooden stick, sometimes with 2 blades, once with an oar he carved from the boat that brought him to the island. He wasn't there to celebrate, he was there to write. What Miyamoto Musashi wrote in that cave in the final months of his life wasn't a war manual. It wasn't a list of techniques. It was something far more dangerous. A complete map of how a human being becomes unbreakable. How the mind is forged into something that does not bend, does not negotiate with weakness, and does not stop. Most people have heard of Musashi. Almost no one understands what he actually said. Because his words aren't motivational. They're surgical. They don't inspire you. They cut away everything that's keeping you soft. What you're about to hear are his exact words, the ones that have quietly transformed every person who ever truly absorbed them. Not because they're poetic, because they're accurate, because somewhere in you, when you hear them, something recognizes the truth it's been avoiding. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which of Musashi's principles you've been violating and what it's been costing you. You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain. Most people read this and think it means be open-minded. Try different approaches. There are many ways to succeed. That's not what it means. Musashi wrote this after spending the first 20 years of his life convinced that the sword was the only path. He trained with ferocious singularity, mastering the blade until no one in Japan could match him. And then, at 40, he stopped fighting duels entirely, not because he was finished, because he realized that a man who only knows how to use a sword is not a complete warrior. He's a man with one answer to every question. This is the first discipline Musashi demands. Not focus, honest self-inventory. The willingness to ask, how many paths do I actually know? And how many am I pretending don't exist because learning them would mean admitting I'm incomplete? Meet Kenji. 27 years old, works in sales. Technically excellent at closing deals. His numbers are strong and he knows it. But his manager keeps telling him the same thing. You need to develop your listening. You talk over clients. You push when you should wait. Kenji hears this and files it away as feedback for later. He's good at what he's good at. Why fix what works? 3 months later, a quieter colleague, with half his talent, closes the biggest account of the quarter. The client says afterward, she really understood what we needed. Kenji had one path. He was excellent on it, and he was being slowly outmaneuvered by people who knew how to walk on ground he had never bothered to learn. Musashi's first cut of discipline is this. You are not disciplined if you are only disciplined in the areas you already enjoy. That's not discipline. That's preference wearing discipline's clothes. Real discipline begins exactly where your comfort ends, in the honest assessment of what you've been refusing to develop. Because developing, it would mean confronting how incomplete you currently are. Kenji didn't need more sales training. He needed to sit in silence and listen to someone else talk for 30 minutes without interrupting. Simple, excruciating, necessary. Approach the enemy with the attitude of finishing him at once. Everyone reads this as aggression. Strike fast. Be decisive. Attack before they can react. That interpretation misses the most important word in the sentence. Once, Musashi wasn't describing speed. He was describing totality. The warrior who approaches with the attitude of finishing at once is not half present, not mentally already at the next task, not leaving part of himself back at camp weighing options. He is entirely, completely, irreversibly committed to the action in front of him. Right now, with everything he has, no exits, no reserves held back for the possibility of retreat. Most people engage with their goals the way a person tests bath water. 1 foot in, temperature check, considering whether to commit. Their training sessions end when they get uncomfortable, not when the session is finished. Their work hours contain the shape of effort, but not its substance. They are present in body and absent in intention. Kenji decided to fix his listening problem. He committed to 1 week of practice. Day 1. He lasts 4 minutes in a meeting without interrupting before his phone buzzes and he glances at it. Day 2. He does better, but he's thinking about his response while the client is still talking. He's not listening. He's waiting. This is the epidemic Musashi diagnosed 400 years ago. We begin things without finishing the act of beginning. We show up without arriving. We move toward the target without the attitude of completion. Musashi himself, in his 20s, used to arrive late to his duels deliberately, sometimes hours late. His opponents would be waiting, growing anxious, losing their composure. He had already won before the first strike, because his opponent had spent 3 hours in a state of mental fragmentation. Kenji's mind was always 3 hours early, already at the next meeting, the next deal, the next conversation, while the one in front of him was still happening. The second discipline, whatever you are doing, finish being there before you start doing it. Not physical presence, intentional totality. The attitude of once. No half measures, no reserved exits, no mental foot already out the door. Musashi didn't half draw his sword. Kenji implemented one rule. Before every client call, 30 seconds of complete stillness. No notes, no preparation, no mental rehearsal. Just 30 seconds of being nowhere, except in the room that was about to begin. His close rate didn't change that month. His client retention score jumped 40%. People could feel the difference between being sold to and being heard. Do not sleep under a roof you have not built with your own hands. This line stops people. It sounds like survivalist advice. Build your own shelter. Be self-sufficient. Don't depend on what others provide. That's close, but it's still the surface. Musashi wrote this in the context of a warrior's relationship with comfort. The roof isn't a roof. It's any structure in your life that protects you from difficulty you haven't earned the right to avoid. The job you stay in because leaving feels dangerous. The relationship you maintain at minimum investment because full presence feels risky. The version of yourself you present to the world that has been carefully designed to generate approval without requiring genuine exposure. He wasn't against comfort. He was against comfort that was borrowed. Comfort that someone else built and you occupy without understanding its cost or its conditions. 6 months into his development work, Kenji had become a genuinely better listener. His results were measurable. His manager was satisfied, and he had quietly stopped pushing himself. He had moved into his new skill, the way you move into a house you didn't build. Gratefully, without examining the foundations, assuming it will hold. Then a client challenge arrived that his new listening skill alone couldn't navigate. Complex, emotionally charged, requiring a combination of empathy and decisive leadership that Kenji had never been forced to develop simultaneously. He listened well and then froze. He had been sleeping under a roof that only covered part of the weather. This is the third cut of Musashi's discipline, and it's the one that separates people who improve from people who transform. Most people fix a weakness until it's no longer embarrassing. Then they stop. The weakness has been patched sufficiently to avoid pain. The roof is good enough to sleep under. Musashi's standard is different. You don't stop when the weakness stops hurting you. You stop when it has become a strength that can carry weight you haven't yet tried to put on it. You build the roof. You understand every beam. You know what it can hold and what would break it. And then you build it stronger. Kenji started doing something that made him deeply uncomfortable. After every difficult client interaction, he wrote for 15 minutes about exactly where he had frozen, hesitated, or defaulted to habit when something better was required. Not a performance review, an architectural inspection. Where was the structure weak? What would have failed in worse weather? His colleagues thought he was being too hard on himself. His manager told him to celebrate his progress more. He kept writing, because he understood something Musashi had known since his first duel. The roof you build yourself is the only one you can trust when the storm is real. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. People love this quote. They put it on posters. They use it as caption for gym photos. They have completely missed what makes it dangerous. Read it again. Today is victory over yourself of yesterday. Tomorrow is your victory over lesser men. Musashi isn't talking about competition. He's talking about sequence. He is telling you with absolute precision that if you make today's battle about beating other people, you have broken the order of operations. The victory over lesser men is the consequence, the automatic downstream result, of the daily practice of winning against yesterday's version of yourself. It is not the goal. It is what falls out of the process when the process is running correctly. The person who trains to beat the competition is training against a fixed external target. The moment they surpass it, they have no North Star. They slow down. They plateau. They start managing their lead instead of extending it. They won the wrong war. The person who trains to beat yesterday has a target that moves every single day. By definition, it is always exactly one step ahead. You can never fully arrive. The race never ends. And this is the feature, not the flaw. 1 year in, Kenji is now consistently one of the top performers in his division. The improvement has been genuine and visible. And for the first time, he catches himself comparing, looking sideways at colleagues, tracking his position in the rankings, making decisions based on where he stands relative to others, rather than who he is becoming. His numbers stabilize. Not because he stopped working, he's working as hard as ever. But the direction of his effort has shifted. He's maintaining a position instead of building a person. The metric he's optimizing for has changed from growth to standing. Musashi at age 50 had defeated every significant swordsman in Japan. His standing was unambiguous. And he wrote, "I am still on the way." Not as humility performance, as strategic fact. He understood that the moment his measuring stick became other people, the training would begin to decay. Because other people are a ceiling. Yesterday's self has no ceiling. It only has a floor, and that floor rises every day you show up. Kenji had to do something psychologically difficult. He had to stop looking at the leaderboard. Literally, he asked his manager to stop sharing the comparative rankings with him for 90 days and replace them with a single personal metric. How did this week's performance compare to last week's? On the dimensions he had identified as his growing edge. The team thought it was strange. In 90 days, he had the best quarter of his career. Not because he stopped caring about results, because he stopped letting results be the mirror he used to see himself. There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within. Everything exists. Seek nothing outside of yourself. This is the one that changes people. And the reason it changes them isn't inspiration. It's because it removes, with surgical finality, the last excuse. Not the obvious excuses. Time, money, opportunity. Those are the excuses people know they're making. Musashi is cutting something deeper. He is removing the invisible excuse. The one that lives underneath every legitimate sounding reason. For not becoming what you're capable of becoming. The invisible excuse is waiting. Waiting for the right system. The right mentor. The right circumstances. The right version of yourself that will finally feel ready to begin. The belief, held with surprising tenacity by otherwise rational people, that somewhere outside of where you currently stand is the key that will unlock everything inside you. There is no such key. Musashi is telling you this not to be harsh, but to be precise. The capacity you are waiting to develop is already structurally present. The discipline you are waiting to feel is already available. The person you are trying to become already exists as potential in the person you are right now. Nothing outside needs to change before you can access it. The access point is a decision. Only a decision. Made today, without waiting for conditions to improve. 18 months after Kenji began this process, someone asked him what program he had used. What book had changed him? Who had coached him? He had to think for a long time before answering. Because the honest answer was that no single external thing had done it. There had been no program, no transformative retreat, no perfect mentor. There had been 15 minutes of daily honest writing, 30 seconds of stillness before every call, a commitment to compare himself only to who he had been yesterday. Things so small and internal that they barely qualified as a system. What had changed wasn't his access to resources. It was his relationship with the only resource that had ever mattered, the one that was already entirely his, that no one could give him and no one could take away. His own standard for what was acceptable. His own willingness to look at himself with the same precision he applied to everything else. His own decision, made daily and without ceremony, to be 1% less comfortable with mediocrity than he had been the day before. Musashi wrote his final words in the cave on the mountain, alone, 60 years old, undefeated, still calling himself a student, still on the way. He didn't write them so that people would admire him. He wrote them so that people would recognize something. The discipline you are looking for is not in this video. It was never in any video. It is in the moment after this video ends. When you are alone with the distance between who you are and who you are capable of being, and you decide, one more time, what to do with that distance. 5 cuts. 5 principles that Musashi distilled from a life no one else has ever lived. Know the paths you've been refusing to walk. Finish the act of being present before you try to be productive. Build the roof yourself or don't sleep under it. Make yesterday the only opponent that matters. And stop waiting for something outside of you to unlock what was always already inside. The chills you feel reading Musashi aren't from the poetry. They're from recognition. The part of you that already knows these things, that has always known them, responding to being seen. He wrote them in a cave, alone, with the certainty of a man who had tested every word against 60 years of reality and found them exact. The question he left behind, the one that doesn't go away, is the same one he asked himself every morning until the day he died. What did I do today that yesterday's version of me could not have done? That question is waiting for you tomorrow morning. The only thing Musashi never told you is what your answer will be.